Hi guys, welcome back. We're in the basement workshop. It's a hot day outside, but it's relatively cool in here. The one perk of having your workshop in the basement is it stays a little bit cooler. But today I have been collecting some kind of like tiny little woodworking tips and tricks over the years that I've never actually tested out. Things that I've committed to memory and I'm like, okay, that looks useful and someday I want to try it, but I've never gotten around to testing it, so we're going to do that in today's video. So these are all relatively simple kind of basic things, but I feel like some of them could be pretty useful. So let's see. So the first trick is useful with the flush trim saw, which mine needs cleaned, but I really love using this saw. This is just a simple one from Amazon. It's small, it works well, and I've seen people put a playing card under, on their material to protect the material as they're using the flush trim saw. So we're going to test that out today. So I have just this, I didn't have a playing card, but I have just this business card that's kind of glossy, and let's see how it works. All right, so I have these 4 little shelves something that I sell in my shop, and I attach this with glue, and then I use screws, and then I'm going to cover this up with dowels using my flush trim saw. So this is the perfect timing to try out the playing card trick on this project. All right, so I put glue in my hole. Now I'm going to put in my dowel. And usually when I'm doing this, I just am tearing up the wood and then just sanding it nicely. But let's see how much this helps. Now, I guess I'm going to put it here because usually I end up with more damage on the top side. So let's see how this works. Okay. So the card has some damage, spared the damage to the wood. It's a little bit higher than I would usually get it trimmed down, but we'll just be able to sand that off, no issue. But the card was sliding around a lot. So for the next one, let me try to cut it and see if we can kind of shape it around the dowel. Let's see if I can just put that around there. All right, she's in there sturdy. Now let's try. That's really high. See how much higher that one is? Okay, so let's just try to, I always have to use my screwdriver my drill to weigh that down, to weigh the wood down. All right, beautiful. That one trimmed up nice and flush. You can see no weird marks on the wood or anything, just some light sanding, and these are perfect, good to go. All right, so for the flush trim, using the playing card or business card or whatever kind of card you have hanging around, I would definitely say that's a win, and I'll be using it again in the future to spare some damage to my wood that I'm typically causing. All right, trick number 2 is using dental floss to get glue in a little crack on wood. You know, sometimes you have like a little crack or something. Oftentimes it happens to me, I feel like, on like the top corner of a piece of wood, where you just need to get a little glue in there, but it's hard to get glue in there without totally breaking the piece off. So I found this trick to use dental floss, and we're going to kind of improvise on how we test it out, but let's see how it works. Okay, so I have this piece of wood. I couldn't find a piece of wood now that I'm looking for it with the perfect type of crack in it, so I just kind of had to break this one apart. But we'll just imagine that there's just a crack in here that we need to try to get glue in that crack, and let's see how it goes. So I have a couple pieces of dental floss here, and I have my glue. Let's just try to put the glue on the top and see how this works. Okay, I mean, the floss is definitely going in there. Okay, not bad so far. I'm just trying to slide this extra glue in there and then floss it down. Okay, now I'm just gonna, since this wood I can just break it apart, let's see. yeah, the glue got down in there pretty nicely. If you can imagine, if it was just not a crack like this that goes all the way through, that it would work really well just to use the dental floss to slide the glue down in there and then just give it a nice little clamping action. And I think that would work well for some like minor imperfections. Very nice. All right, so trick number 2, the dental floss to get glue into a crack. Overall, I think it's a success, and I would definitely use this in the future. Okay, the next one, I was kind of on the fence about testing this one because I don't feel like it's something that I'll actually use. I don't think it will fit my needs, but I'm going to try it anyways. So basically, somebody said that you can use a straw, like a plastic straw, to clean up any kind of glue squeeze out. So let's see how it works. All right, so I have 2 pieces of scrap wood that we're just gonna glue it together. So let me just kind of a little bit more dramatically put glue on here so we can get some nice, good squeeze out. Okay, that's kind of a lot. Let me just give it a little bit of spread. If you're looking for a nice glue spreader, this is just like this is actually something used for like makeup or for applying a face mask, and it has like a silicone head, so it's actually really useful. All right, so let's glue this. Okay, we got a little bit of glue squeezing out, I think is enough to test. So let's test, and this is just a plastic straw. I know we're not supposed to use these, so I feel like that's why I'm not going to probably use this trick, and I also think that this is going to kind of make a big mess, especially since I stain a lot of my projects. I just feel like it's going to still leave a huge glue mark, but let's see. So I just cut like a point on the straw, and let's see, how does this work to gather up the glue? Wow, honestly, not bad. I'm actually surprised at how well that worked. And then I guess you could always just clip it off. You know, I wouldn't have had to do it in one pass. Maybe I can just clip it off and... Okay, that is, honestly, that turned out better than I thought. I'm kind of amazed right now. I think I need a second to process. Yeah, look, because you can get that nice pointy tip and it just gets the glue. My goodness, who knew this was going to work so well? So the straw to remove the glue, I almost removed this from my testing list because I felt like this is not going to be it. But I'm so surprised that turned out really well, and I actually think that I will use it for certain applications. I think it's really handy. I feel like especially sometimes you're working on a project where it's like a really tight space and it's hard to properly get the glue cleaned up with a chisel or something. I usually like to clean up my glue after it dried with a chisel, so then I know that there's not going to really be any trace of it when I'm staining. But I definitely think this was a good hack, and I would use it again. So that was a surprise. Okay, the next woodworking tip is when you're working with really small nails, which I was recently refinishing like an antique chest, and the nails were so small and I was really struggling to get them into the wood. Some people recommended to use a needle nose pliers, which I think is a really good tip that I didn't think about and I didn't do. But I saw another tip online where you could just use a piece of paper. So let's test out this trick. All right, so I have just another little scrap piece of wood. I have a piece of paper, and then I have some nails. So these are 5/8 inch, very tiny nails. And it's like, you know, my big clumsy fingers, like it's just, sometimes it's kind of hard to hold it. These ones actually have a head, so it's not as bad, but if you're working with like a brad, it's even more difficult. So basically just punch the nail through just a sheet of paper, and then, you know, wherever you want the nail to go, just use the paper to hold it in place instead of trying to use your fingers to hold it, and get it going. And then, I mean, I should have put this towards the edge probably, but then you can just rip the paper away and get the nail in. Oops, that came out. Finish the nail off. So I think this is a pretty good trick. I'm not always working with nails like this, but Maybe for those one-off projects, it might come in handy. It's a little hard to see the nail under the paper, but then it's kind of nifty. Just rip the paper away. Not bad. All right, so the paper nail trick is overall not bad. I don't think it will be super useful to me, but it's one of those things you can just keep it in mind when you're working on that kind of rare project and you need something like this. It's an easy fix. All you need is just a piece of paper. So overall, I'd say it's a success. Okay, the next trick is a little bit weird, but it could be a useful sanding tool for getting into weird spaces. But basically the trick is to use like an old putty knife or something that you just not, it's dirty, maybe you're not really using it anymore. I don't actually have one, but I'm just going to use this old key card from a hotel, and we're going to basically make this into like a little sanding tool. All right, so for this, as I mentioned, I have just an old card from a hotel. You can use a putty knife or, you know, something else that is kind of a little bit more rigid. And then I have this double-sided tape. All right, so we have double-sided tape on one end of the card. Now we're going to take a piece of sandpaper and we're going to stick the sandpaper on there. So we're just making this little kind of edge, just like a really skinny little sanding tool, which I feel like could be useful. Okay, so let's take this off the double-sided tape. Let's stick our sandpaper on. Okay, so we got this nice little thin edge piece of sandpaper. Now, if we take like this, I feel like it could be useful for something like this, like what we did earlier with the glue experiment. You know, it's not flawless, but it's not bad, I guess. I think this is pretty nifty. I think this could be useful, just have it laying around for those. Again, you know, all of these things are kind of just like, when you need it, it would be handy. So that's the thin little sanding tool. All right, the sanding tool, I'd say success. I think you can never have too many little sanding gadgets, DIY gadgets around your shop. So success. Okay, so the last two tricks, they're kind of related and it's kind of two different methods of doing the same thing. But basically this is for people who sometimes print something on just a regular sheet of like computer printer paper and want to transfer this design onto a piece of wood so that they could cut it out with a scroll saw or a bandsaw or something like that. So I occasionally cut out stuff with my scroll saw, and I usually just go with kind of the tried and true method, which is covering your piece of wood with blue painter's tape and then using some type of spray adhesive to just glue the paper onto the painter's tape itself. So that works well, but I found a couple other methods, so let's try them out. Okay, so I have two different just cute little images that I've printed out to test these. So we have two different methods, two different images. So let's start our test. Okay, so I have two just plain pieces of wood. So I think I'll put the cat over here because it needs a little bit more space, and then we'll do the bird on this smaller one. This bird is super cute. Okay, so the first trick for transferring the pattern is to just put it on top of your wood. We're not adhering it or anything. It's just sitting on top of there. And then basically use a push pin, which I could not find a push pin, so I just have this little nail which has a pretty fine point to it. So I'm going to try this. And basically what the instructions or what this tip was telling me to do is to just press into the wood every 1/4 inch to kind of transfer this pattern onto the wood. So let me just see how this works. Okay, so I finished punching it. Now we're gonna reveal it. The one thing I'm gonna say is that because this isn't attached to the wood, it was like, if it moves a little bit, then you've kind of lost your place. So it's a little bit tricky, but let's see. It's a little bit hard to see on the camera, but it actually did work pretty well to make a nice little outline of this cute bird. So let's take it over to the scroll saw and see how it cuts. Okay, the second method for transferring something from a printout to a piece of wood. Now this one is interesting and I'm super curious if this will actually work. But basically what I've read online is that you can just use an iron to transfer the ink onto the wood. Just a regular old iron. All right, so my iron has been heating up. I have it on the highest setting. I don't really know. This is just a total experiment. So let's see, can we get this cat onto the wood by using just an iron? And again, this is just a regular printout, just regular ink, nothing special about it. Let's see. Okay, it's starting to. You can kind of see the tail a little bit. But again, see, now I've moved it. So you definitely, when you're using these tricks, you have to find a way to keep your template in place. Since I have my double-sided tape handy, let me just put a little bit. God, how do you cut this stuff? This is a nightmare. Okay. I'm just gonna put one piece for now out here. This is gonna be beyond my cutting area. I'll try not to iron over it. All right, now back to the ironing. All right. So you can see it kind of worked, but it really didn't work well enough. All right, so for the pattern transfer tricks, the iron didn't work. That's a failure, period. The push pin, putting a hole every 1/4 inch with a push pin or something like that, worked pretty well. The bird looks a little bit weird because of it doesn't have the detail of the wings, but it did work pretty well. Now, I noticed when I was cutting it with the scroll saw that the holes would get filled with dust. So it kind of made your pattern disappear. So I'd say you could trace it with a pencil to keep your lines a little bit clearer once you have the holes. Otherwise, you know, you can just blow out the dust or like tap it out every once in a while. But you'll definitely want to make sure you cut inside of the holes that you punched. You can still see some of the little holes on here because I didn't cut it the best, but it was just kind of a quick experiment. But I would say this is pretty good for a basic template that you need to transfer onto wood. For something more intricate, this definitely wouldn't work. I think it would get too confusing with all the holes and where you need to cut. So that is our experiment of a few different woodworking tricks for your shop. So hopefully you got something valuable from this video. And if you have any tricks to share, please put them in the comments. I'm always looking for new ideas and new things to try. So thank you so much for watching.